How long have you had the Kemper already?
I have the KEMPER? Man, I think it's been about 6 years already.
And you didn't feel that it became outdated in any way?
Well, the KEMPER has an advantage that you see in few things which the iPhone doesn't have anymore. It updates from the first one. So the guy who has an old KEMPER, like Torquato who bought it, the first guy who bought the KEMPER and believed in it, his updates just like mine does.
Didn't they change processor?
No, I think it has been modernizing. They might have changed the processor, but the system has been updating. For example, when I started with the KEMPER, it didn't have so many reverbs. It didn't have so many modulations. I used that little white one from Inventide to do the modulations. I used some extra things. It has been updating. It has the reverbs and it updates for the first guy who bought it too. So that's very interesting.
But the interesting thing is, for example, technology, right, man? Technology over time becomes outdated. But after 10 years, you don't feel that the processor can no longer handle some new updates. That's not the case.
No, they really nailed it. Just like the Big Sky and Timeline, right? To this day, nothing new has been released above these two guys here. No. How many years? Man, I bought a Timeline back when I was teaching at LA. That must have been about 15 years ago when I bought my Timeline 15 years ago. If you look up when the Big Sky and Timeline were released, nothing superior to these has been invented to this day. How is that possible? The guy made this technology, and technology, as you said, keeps evolving, keeps growing. These guys are still very current even today in terms of quality and possibilities, right?
But I also think that when they launched the Kemper, the Timeline, the Big Sky, they must have used a microprocessor with a very high DSP, even if they weren't going to use it.
There was extra capacity.
There was already extra capacity to continue. If we add more features, it won't make the person who bought the first one have to sell it to buy another. No, we have the capacity to work with modulation, reverb, and delay. Because in DSP, that's what consumes the most processing.
Mine is the stage version, right? Which is all on the floor there.
That's really cool.
So it's really practical. I bought it just to use in the studio and was going to keep my analog pedals for live shows and such. When I played with it live for the first time, I said, open it up on the monitor for me to test in a church, because everything was very rushed. 3, 4, go, turn it on, pass, let's go, start singing. Now 5 minutes. When he opened it, I said, wow, look at the sound that came out. Right away, the guy just opened the monitor and it already sounded great. I said, oh man, I liked it. I bought a small bag, put it in, light. My case was heavy. Whenever I arrived at a show, you would see the case kind of crooked, as if it had been thrown by the airline, a pedal slightly loose. That broke the seal. I used Velcro and a seal on a Big Sky on a Timeline. You get there and see the pedal turn like this, that it broke. You say, wow, what a heartache.
I'm interrupting you, but next week I'm going to play in Sao Paulo. So I was telling my wife, I said, Tati, I'm just going to take my little drive pedal, plug it in there, and everything will be fine. She said, no, you have to take the pedal board because people like to see the pedal board. I said, no, Tati, I'm going to use the little pedal if she doesn't take the pedal board.
And people really do like to see the pedal board, but all this logistics is complicated, right? So I put the Kemper, his Pro, in a carry-on bag. I push it, put it on top. It goes with me quietly, and it arrives there just fine.
Do you also put clothes in that carry-on bag?
Sometimes I put them in. Sometimes I put them in the backpack and such. It became very practical, right? Much more relaxed.
Yeah, I talked to my wife. I said, wife, we want to avoid clutter, right, man? Just by lightening the load a bit.
Could it be the gray hair you said? After 40, we become more like this. I think I'll avoid the hassle.
Yeah, everyone, man. There were about 180 guests here. Everyone says the same thing.
Oh yeah, practicality wins. In the past, when the sound was bad, when you compared, and the sound was like very distant, then you thought, well, it's still worth carrying the weight. Now, when you play on the equipment and the sound, man, especially when you have to play with headphones all the time, the quality of the amp varies a lot. So, with a digital system connected directly, you always get the same sound in your headphones, man. It's a joy.
You wouldn't want any other life. There's that thing, man. You're going to play a project that's yours, instrumental music.
Yes.
Then we're talking about a different department, right?
For sure.
But accompanying a singer, man, then you're also entering another drawer. Yes. You have to deal with different gigs, with different mindsets.
And I'm not I'm never the guy who's going to say, now only digital is good, analog is bad, who uses it? No, none of that. It's like you said, they are different stories and situations. You're going to do a TV show with no structure at all. A hidden amp, you plug it in, the guy brings a direct box like this to you and hands it over. What do you do with that, right? The pedal board today is becoming more expensive than having a Kemper. You need to have an amp simulator. You need to have a bunch of different pedals to get the sound, depending on the artist you're playing with. Then you have a Kemper. You have everything. With that, you have sound for any artist. It solves everything, right? You already have the amp there. It goes straight. It's ready. It's really cool.
Look, the Timeline came out in 2011 and the Big Sky came out in 2013. It's still good today.
And it hasn't been replaced, right?
They themselves haven't released anything different.
They even released a prettier one now, right? They released a new model, but I think it's the same sounds, just the design changed a little.
And there's also this issue of technology, right? Because it's different from a cell phone, where we deal a lot with disruptiveness, right? Which is a technology that makes the previous one obsolete. If at some point you don't have a newer iPhone or a newer phone, you start not being able to access certain things anymore, right? It doesn't work anymore, right?
It stops updating. That's it.
Which is a bit different again from the Kemper issue, right? Because nothing new and disruptive comes along that makes the Kemper processor from 10 years ago obsolete. Because a 10-year-old computer processor, man, maybe you can't do much with it anymore.
For sure. And that's an advantage that guitarists have always had in the analog world, right? For example, the older the guitar, the better. And the keyboardist almost has to go north every year, having to replace their equipment. We've always had that advantage. But when it moved to digital, there's this issue. Hey, will a new Kemper, a new model come out? And it has lasted quite a while, hasn't it? You have a Kemper. I've had mine for many years. Torquato had a Kemper. Torquato, who is a genius, whom I'm a big fan of. Back then, you see the guy with the Kemper and you wonder, really? I remember when I met him, I went to the studio. He was a partner in a studio. I think it was with Daniel Musi in downtown. And I went to take over the studio with a friend. We went like to take over the room with the construction. And that's where I met Torquato many years ago. And he said, hey, I got a new guitar here, man, an SR from the United States. Man, this is almost 20 years ago. I had never heard of anyone here, no, an SR. Really? Oh, okay, cool. But I'd never heard of it. Today, it's the guitar everyone talks about, the trend, the craze. So you see, he's a guy ahead of his time.
He always liked to try new things. And it was interesting that he said, man, I buy everything new. That's good. So AD released it. He's going to buy it.
He was the first guy I saw too, promoting, talking about it.
And he has all these pedals. He also has a partnership with AD. Right, but anyway, let's go, man. Let me get my notes here. Because I'm going to go back in time now.
We embrace the pedals here and never let go. This is a topic that guitarists like.
They like it. Right, man. I started to enjoy talking about it more here because before that, I had little interest, man.
It's a big world. There's a lot to it.
So what you mentioned is the Big Sky MX. They released it on A. What did they release, right? Yeah, but it's basically a Big Sky, except you can put two reverbs at the same time. It has impulse response. It has stuff there. It has a technology. They added some new technologies, but it's basically the Big Sky.
I see. And now there's the possibility to use two at the same time, which wasn't available before.
Cool. Man, let's go. You started your professional life. I didn't want to talk much about the beginning, but rather about the moment you started playing professionally. Your first gig was with Tokeno Walter, was that it?
Yes, gig and gospel. I started playing at night in a band with friends and such. The first big gospel job I did was with Tokeno Walter.
Do you remember the year of that?
I think it was 2007. I think it was around 2007. That's when the lineup of Tokeno Walter changed. The first lineup was Davi Luiz, right? And I was part of the second lineup, which included Rafael Bittencourt and Felipe Alves. That was my first gospel job.
Tokeno Walter is already outside of Ministerio Pacentar, right?
It is still a ministry to retire.
It was still at that time? It was still at that time.
The group that left formed a separate ministry.
Oh, which was Trazendo a Arca?
Trazendo a Arca, right?
I see, okay. So you stayed?
I stayed. The lineup that made Deus do impossible. I'll see a turnaround, right? Some songs that were quite popular are from my lineup. Me, Felipe Rafael, a good group there too.
Felipe.
Philip Alves.
Oh, was Felipe Alves from Toque da Nota?
Felipe. Alves, yes. He plays with Javan there. He's doing great.
Yeah, he plays a lot. So tell me a bit. How long were you there? What did you experience? What was the opportunity?
Yes, I was from the church. And I was there. I even sat in the pew watching Davy Luis, the guys playing, ministering. And I was already playing at night. I was already a musician. I used to say, oh, I'm not going to go over there to chat with the guys. I'm already working. A lot of people must approach them just to get something out of it. I'll just stay in my own corner. And I spent a long time sitting in the church pew without introducing myself. Until one day I spoke with Luis, who was the leader of Louveau. I said, hey, man, I play Louis Archangel. I wanted to join in with the group here. And he said, oh, that's great, man. Here's my phone number. Come next Saturday, and if you play well, you can start with us right away. I was surprised and thought, wow, what a nice guy, right? He gave me his phone number. He was really popular at the time. Look at me, God of Promises. The songs were hits, and the guy was very kind. We've even met several times after that. Very kind, very generous. Then, the next week, I went to the rehearsal, and he couldn't make it because he was traveling. The following week, they left. Didn't even get there.